kodwa zinsukwini zanamhlanje awujwayelekile kanjani kodwa zinsukwini zanamhlanje sibona kwenzeka kanjani
We're going to talk a little bit about heroes and heroines in conservation and community development. I've had a very lucky life in that I've had some incredible role models for my work in Africa. All of the people I'll highlight today share one common thread. They started out with a passion for Africa, and when they began their work, whether it was safaris, conservation, philanthropy, or all three. In these unsure economic times, Lynn and I wanted to highlight some examples of people who started a whole virtuous cycle with very simple acts that snowballed into larger movements. Often they acted without even realizing how huge their ripple effect would be. And they ultimately became involved in organizations and companies that we all know today, and they've really changed the face of tourism in Africa. To finish my section of the talk with an example of how what we call a voluntourism trip has reshaped one woman's life. This is Jess Atkins, and I thought it was a particularly apt story because she's from here in New York. This is a shot I had to pry out of her because she's quite a different woman today. But she actually worked for Vogue as a special events director, and before that for 10 years in the special events, working with all the different brands that we all know, Gucci, Saint Laurent, etc. So that was her world. In doing that, she worked with a lot of different charities and did a lot of good, but she wanted to go a little deeper. She felt she needed to have a deeper connection with an organization, and through that process, she learned about a company called MEEK, which is Medical and Educational Aid to Kenya. But the problem was they didn't have a U.S. chapter. So she talked to them, and the passion sort of burned down the phone lines between New York and London because they were equally passionate about what they did. And ultimately, they invited her on her first trip. So she went from this world on her first trip, as I said, what we call a voluntourism trip. She had a little trepidation there about that small plane. And she actually added on a camel safari to the heart mission that she was doing with the doctors, and fell deeply in love with the people of the north of Kenya. These are some of the shots from her trip. So much so that when she came back, she resigned from her job 2 weeks later, and she opened the U.S. chapter of MEEK. And now her life's gone from, you see her in the background of that shot on the left, planning events in the background, to really deeply involved in African life, to working in hospitals, schools. She's out in the field with the guides. And that's a new life, basically born just out of her first trip to Africa. But I asked her, when I said to her, I said, well, that's pretty drastic to give up your job and pretty much everything you've done for 10 years. And I said, what really inspired you? And she said, well, it was this little guy, Justin Mboy. This was on her first mission, and it's amazing that she actually got the shot of the little kid who ended up sort of being her hero. He was waiting to be seen by the doctors, and ultimately they said that his heart condition was so severe that he couldn't be operated on that trip. And so after a few days passed, he was still there, and Jess went, why is he still here? And she talked to the nurses, and they said, well, he's been here for 10 months, and his family can't afford to pay his bill, so we can't release him. So she went, okay, this is crazy. So she cleared his bill, and he was able to go home. But then she got back to the U.S., and she just couldn't get him out of her mind. And she'd written his name down on a piece of paper. So when she went back to Kenya, she got the guides, this is actually at Olanana, and said, guys, you have to help me find this kid. So they went from village to village, literally calling out his name, trying to find him. And they found him. This is the shot where they found him. You can't really see from this picture as well as in real life, but he'd lost a huge amount of weight at that point, and he couldn't really even walk more than a few steps without losing his breath because of a hole in his heart. So she said, I've got to get these doctors down to help him. And she got him screened. Make a long story short, they came and they did a reparative operation on his heart, so now he can breathe. It's not perfect, but at least he's bought many years of life. This is actually right after the surgery with a doctor who, actually the doctor on the right is, it's a Tana
Page,
thank you. Tana Page, she's the daughter of one of the safari companies you all know. And this shot was taken 6 months later, looking a lot more healthy. She put him in a boarding school so that he could be sure to have a regular diet, nutritional diet at the school. so he could fatten up again. And then that was a year later. So he's definitely a very happy boy. So what's amazing about this is, one little boy changed her life. And I've spoken about a lot of people today, but this is really why we're all in the business. It's giving and receiving joy. Africa does that, and it's sort of the one thing that CNN doesn't tell you when it's showing all the horror and poverty. That this is the kind of thing that you can get out of an African trip. African tourism companies have changed from just doing good works on the side to actually having philanthropic and conservation work be a part. It's an integral part of the whole African experience now. So the next time a client says to you, I just can't afford to take a safari, this is not the year. You think about these people, all the challenges they face, and how much Africa changed them. They also changed Africa, of course. And tell them, you know what, you can't afford not to take a safari this year.